Hello there and welcome to Spin Legal. Hey, congratulations. This is episode 75.
Yep.
Right. And only another 25 to go and then we can retire from doing this, okay? 100 episodes down, yeah?
Well,
Yeah.
we should be able to sell our shares and get millions of dollars.
Yeah, when we got 100 episodes down, we can sell our shares for millions of dollars. I appreciate that. So who's going to buy the show off of us? Yeah. Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. And this is Spin Legal, brought to you by Angela and Peter from Invictus Legal LLP. So there we go. And today we are discussing bylaws. Now, everybody, I think there isn't a person in the world that doesn't hate bylaws, eh? Let's be honest.
The bylaw officer comes snooping around their property and wants to go and look at something. Oh, your grass is about 1 inch too tall, so you better cut it before they come.
We'll talk about that because you know. I think we'll get onto that subject. So, so let's get there. And okay, so let's start off. So if you need to contact Invictus Legal, you can do so on our phone number 905-688-5598. Email Angela at angela@weareinvictus.legal, or myself at peter@weareinvictus.legal, or contact our website, get onto our website at https://weareinvictus.legal. There you go. And so, yes, as I said, the topic is what are bylaws? And essentially, bylaws are the local rules that you've got in any town and city that are decided locally. And they're called bylaws and not laws, primarily because they have local applicability. They, generally speaking, there are probably standards for things like the length of time that it takes for a traffic light to turn in Ontario, but where the placement of traffic lights, for example, is a local matter. And often decided by the local city council. So that's, so that's what bylaws are, the local rules that allow you to govern an individual city.
Yeah, some of them are pretty interesting. Others are dry as dust, depending on what you're looking for.
Absolutely. But then that's the truth about law anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whichever one.
The Income Tax Act is a very interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah. Some laws are dry as heck, And okay, so how do what bylaws operate? Essentially, what happens is the local city local city or municipality, correctly called municipality, whether it's a city or a region or a county or a whatever, that municipality is the correct term. Municipalities will basically each have their rules. So, for example, only 33 1/3 people can cross the zebra crossing at any one time.
And 1/3 of a person?
Well,
how's that measured?
I don't know, but it was you see it was the reference there to the Beatles crossing the zebra crossing outside Abbey Road, and the fact that back in the day single LP records were cut on a 33 1/3 speed, weren't they? 33 1/3 RPM. So that was my 33 1/3 people coming across the crossing. Anyway, that aside, a bit of fun. Yeah. So basically, how they operate is that they actually will have draw their power from the Municipal Act, and they operate at a local level. And for example, it is possible and feasible for St. Catherine's to have a limit on the height of houses due to the height of buildings due to the bylaws. That, let's say, St. Catherine's has a limit that says we should not have buildings more than 25 floors high. Niagara Falls, on the other hand, could decide entirely different and say, hey, no, we're going to allow buildings up to 77 floors high.
Yeah, or you can go into a single family neighborhood where they all have 1 or 2-story homes, and then we can just decide that we're going to put a condo tower in there that's 88 floors. Why not? It's worth them.
Right.
Neighbors would love it.
Yeah, but there's differences between each town, and
Mhm.
often what'll happen in municipal politics is that, for example, many municipalities will recognize the fact that a local area, let's say Barton Street in Hamilton or something like that, has got special local relevance, and they might well do things to beautify that street
Mhm.
or celebrate that street. Maybe it's 150 years old this year. Right?
Yeah.
Those sorts of things are things that local municipalities can do. They're able to spend money to upkeep said streets or do whatever is necessary as part of that, but that's part of your local municipal budget. Right? So things like bylaws cover planning, zoning, traffic lights, snow clearance, business licensing, animal licensing, buildings, and animal licensing. You think, well, okay, so you need a license for your pet goldfish, right?
Yeah, you need a license for your turtle.
Well, actually, turtle makes a bit more sense because your turtle might be caught walking across the road somewhere, right?
Mhm.
Especially if it's a what are those called? The ones that got those nasty claws on them.
Oh, yes, snapping turtles.
Snapping turtle, that's the
Yeah.
one I'm thinking. Yeah. So especially that sort of thing. Now, business licensing, that doesn't mean to say that every single business that ever operates within a city needs licensing. A lot of that is about, for example, if you're operating a garage or workshop or something like that that is semi-industrial, that requires certain things, those things have to be licensed.
Mhm.
For example, you cannot operate a hoist lift in your private garage at home.
Mhm.
All right, you can't be repairing cars on your driveway at home. You can repair your personal car, but you can't make a business at home.
Mhm.
All
Or
right.
all these are my personal cars. Then I got to set up a
Um,
curbsider business.
yeah. And there's rules about, for example, snow clearance. Right. So the whole point about things, each of these have rules about how they function, and there's planning will put in where the traffic lights are. All of that's decided in the municipality. Planning bylaws, generally speaking, most planning and zoning bylaws are generally set once every 50 years or something. Typically, I guess about when there's a new planning or planning act comes into play. Unless you happen to be Niagara Falls, in which case they put them as when the last planning act came into play, right?
Yep, and what effect that has on perhaps the legitimacy of bylaws that are derived from it.
The potential is, yes, that it doesn't operate very well,
Mhm.
because in fact the sections that particular that the zoning bylaw operates from no longer on the books.
Mhm.
Right? It's possible they've been encompassed within another part of the planning act, of the new planning act, but again, the bylaw hasn't been updated to include that. Right. So and all of those sorts of things are an important part of how we run our municipal life. And if you think about it, a lot of people say, hey, federal politics is sexy, provincial politics is sexy, but that's where they get things done. But in reality, everything bows to municipal politics at the end of the day, because it's about the roads, it's about the snow clearance, it's about the traffic lights.
It's the government that is closest to you.
Yeah. And it impacts where you live. It impacts where you work.
Yep.
And if those two happen to be the same, well,
And
good.
even your pets, impacts on your pets.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see
Okay.
what happened when St. Catharines tried to pass a cat licensing bylaw. It didn't work.
I can't see that happening.
Yeah, like I was asking them or suggesting about the bylaw enforcement officers to go door to door to take head counts of cats that are in every property, and what that's going to do.
I can see my my past cats holding up signs saying, "I will not be counted."
No census. They don't want to fill out any census.
Yeah, I'm not filling out a census form, please. Okay, so who makes bylaws? That's an interesting question, an important question, because essentially they're all passed by your local municipality or town hall.
Mm-hmm.
So every time there is actually a council meeting, when the mayor's calling his buddies together and they're chatting about what needs to change in the city, there's usually a whole heap of bylaws that come alongside that that enable local things to happen. For example, believe it or not, if there's a local event in the local park, you often need a bylaw to allow that event to occur, especially if there's going to be late night music.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep. And also security, you have to account for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because all you need is somebody to sue the city because somebody goes in there and they get hurt.
Yeah. And the bylaws are there for good reason. In those types of events, the bylaws, they operate bylaws that are fairly standard. They've probably been using the bylaws for, 20 years or something, and for every event. And they use the standard bylaw. But what you might hear, for example, at the City Hall, if you happen to be there for an event bylaw, is, can we have an exception to the noise bylaw for Friday, August the 12th, because we're going to have an event going on in this particular park.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's about that's what the city councillors will make their mind up, and in the city council meeting, typically what will happen is one of the senior officers within the staff, like the chief administrative officer or maybe the planning officer, will stand up and give what the staff's view is upon any bylaw that's about to be presented to the city, and then councillors will ask questions, will discuss it through, and then make a decision. By the way, every planning application that is made to a city will eventually end up in a bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
So you're planning to make Browne Towers on Western Hill, two fabulous 20-story high places that make Angela Browne a multi-trillionaire, and she has to make an application. She has to make an application to actually build them through the city. And once she's convinced the planning department that that's a good build, she then basically will then get within a couple of months, there'll be a bylaw that's passed that grants that permission for that build to go ahead. And there will be rules attached to it and report backs to the city and the like. And these are all part and parcel of everything that you do when it comes down to building something new. There's even bylaws. If for example, when they built a new bridge like the Burgoyne Bridge here in St. Catharines, when they built that, there's a bylaw that's created to build that.
Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, that was a very expensive bylaw.
Yeah, that's another matter entirely. That's a pet peeve of mine about how expensive some of these things become. Right. That's okay. So moving on, how bylaws are made. Essentially, what happens to the vast majority of them, staff will draw up a bylaw. Say, if you're talking about, let's say, a bylaw to pass the budget for, for 2026, the staff will produce the bylaw that states that the city believes, that the budget bylaw should be passed. And then the city council will vote on that. Right? At that point, maybe or maybe they don't vote on it. Maybe there's some discussion beforehand, and you say, "No, Angela, you're spending way too much money on this and that and the other." Councillor Angela, that's not on. And you respond, "No, Councillor Peter, that's you're undercutting the value of the project."
Yeah, like we got 50,000 people demonstrating outside who want that project implemented.
Yeah, but they're not here in the council chambers, Angela. I'm not listening to them. Yeah, but there's a lot of, and actually the point being is that you can come, and it's actually, in a way, municipal politics is often is often politics at its rawest, isn't it? Because what can happen is, you talked about demonstrators who are outside City Hall. Many of them actually come in. They might stand there with placards that say, we want Browne Towers, or we don't want Browne Towers, right? And what will happen is, when there's a planning meeting going on, for example, we're talking about planning matters here. So there's a planning meeting. The member staff will put up the project. They will say, the project is planned to build, 25 floors of ultra modern, affordable living in the western part of St. Catharines. And by the way, the builders are going to sponsor a new bus route to and from their built property. Right, and so they'll give, the member staff will give the patter like that. Council members will have the opportunity to question the member staff about what they believe the project to be, and typically objectors or members of the public who've got comments, either as an objection or in praise of the project, will come up and stand and make their point in front of Town Hall. And then the last person to speak will actually be the person who is proposing the plan from the developer. And that's how that functions. And the reason for that is that the developer has to be there, and the developer has to put their viewpoint up. The city, it might seem that you're double presenting that development, and you are, because the city officers give their viewpoint about what that development means, but the developer themselves may actually come up with a brand new idea as to why their development is worthy of the city support. Especially if they don't get the support of the staff. And on rare occasions, you find that the staff members say, well, we don't believe this is the right building for this part of the city.
Yep.
And for example, that might well be, if it's a single family home zoned area, mainly what's called R1 houses, R1, R2 properties, and you're now putting together a 30-floor R3 condo unit within it. Wouldn't be a good match. And the same would happen. And the funny thing is that I've seen a city council meeting whereby what happened is a load of local protesters came along. I say protesters, they were normal people, regular people, and they said, I like these houses, but they just don't work in our neighborhood. concerned about the additional people that are going through, and it's not right. We don't need this.
Usually it's usually a lot of times it's also the use of city resources, sewage, water, and that type of thing, traffic, and it could put a wear and tear on the system, cost more money.
Well, and the funny thing is, of course, is that you could have a relatively calm neighborhood, not exactly very enhanced, but putting in 25 new houses in that neighborhood might well change the balance of how that neighborhood is.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and that's an important factor, and those sort of things are what the city makes their mind up upon. Right.
Yeah, like they're trying to see if they can get a residential mix. Like sometimes if you start putting apartment buildings or small apartment buildings in a single family neighborhood, you're going to change the residential mix for sure.
Yeah, if you've got a neighborhood that's 100%, 100% detached, properties, each house having, 3/4 of an acre of land, a minimum size to it, and now all of a sudden you're putting in a 30-floor, even a 10-floor apartment building in that area, you're suddenly tripling the number of traffic by one building. Right.
Yeah.
And that could have serious implications. And essentially, at a certain point, what will happen is the neighbors will complain, and they'll say, "No, I think this is I don't like this. It's ruining our neighborhood," type thing. Dave Wheeler talks about this as actually.
There's always the NIMBYs and the YIMBYs.
Yeah, NIMBYs. Yeah, exactly. Not in my backyard.
Yeah, and then the YIMBYs are yes in my backyard.
Yeah, and you see the whole question about not in my backyard is, of course, oh, I love this project. I love this project, but not in my backyard.
Yeah.
Right.
Really good.
And I'm going
downtown St. Catharines. Nobody will care.
I'm going to fight for the death to make sure this is not in my backyard, type thing.
This is what happened in Port Dalhousie. They were planning a 17-story condo with a movie theater and everything down there. And I was the first person who asked. I said, I doubt this project will ever be built. Even though they got it approved through at the time at the Ontario Municipal Board, everything was going through, and it still hasn't been built.
Yeah,
right. It's so interesting because at that time, I just said, if you want to put something up like that, why don't you just put it downtown St. Catharines? Nobody will care.
Yeah. Well, actually, the weirdest thing about something like that, of course, is that how many building projects that we've got, how many lots of land, and I've watched them over the years in various city meetings, in various places that I've lived in, how, they come along with a new proposal, and they throw every hand in the room's up, yes, I like this proposal.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years down the line, there's still an empty lot there that hasn't been, there's not even a spade in the ground in there.
Yep, no shovels in the ground.
Yeah.
And
then it goes dead for 10 years. And then you've kind of got this murmur. There's like, oh yeah, we like this project. We love this project. And they're all voting all again for exactly the same plot of land. And again, 2 years goes by and nothing happens.
Yeah, that was sort of like in St. Catharines. They were all making these big, huge plans about the behind the St. Paul Street, right? The whole space, the lot behind St. Paul Street, like where the Performing Arts Center and the art school and that currently sit, right? At that time, there was a defunct building, which a Canada Haircloth occupied. So everybody was going About are going to be putting them behind St. Paul Street. So there's all kinds of proposals. And then eventually, it was under Brian McMullen, and he decided to put the big, huge downtown revitalization project. I'm trying to remember what year, but it was the early 2010s. And then they built the Performing Arts Center, built the Meridian Arena, built the art school, and it was done through a number of partnerships, and it worked. And it actually brought a lot of life to downtown. But then the pandemic happened, and now we're still trying to breathe life back into downtown. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, there was also this one, a new hotel that was supposed to be the future of Niagara Falls, partly hotel, partly condominium building, that was supposed to be 77 floors high. It kind of looked like a shopping basket, a shopping basket for a bottle of wine, that kind of height, if you can imagine that.
Oh, the Niagara 77. Oh boy.
Yeah, and what happened to it? We're now 2 years after that, not a stone has been turned. And in fact, actually, I've always said that it was supposed to be built on the ruins of on the concrete that was laid down for an old hotel back in 2001, before 9/11 happened, and that basically that got terminated because of 9/11, and they're supposed to be able to build this new hotel straight on top of that pre-existing concrete. Well, that stuff doesn't happen because it's what's called continuous pour concrete. So you must pour it all the way up the building. So I think that they suddenly realized they couldn't build on top of the pre-existing structure, and they wanted to start, and they needed to start again, and they didn't have the money for that.
And a lot of times these big condos and everything they build, like I think there's about 4 or 5 of these condo plans around our downtown. And I wonder how many people can actually afford to buy in these condos.
Well, the other question that Dave Wheeler raises actually about some of these ones is, there's only so many building workers in a particular neighborhood that are available to do work. If the building workers are already 100% utilized, what chance have you got of getting any new building workers to start the next project?
Yep, got to wiggle your nose, I suppose, and produce more building workers, or get Harry Potter to cast a spell or something and make them appear.
Yeah, maybe. That's about the only way that you really can, because in that scenario, and Dave's right, that in that scenario, what can you
Yes. Okay, Dave, you're freezing.
Yeah, you've only got enough jobs for the numbers of building workers you've got in a neighborhood, and that's all there is to it. Because in fact, you're not going to be able to employ a building worker that comes from Toronto to start building on your lot. Exactly. They're going to be local by definition.
Yeah, and even doing it and starting, like I said, okay, where's the location? Okay, that's right next to a drug use place, so there's a lot of users there. So I don't think people want to buy a condo that's going to be next to it. There has to be a lot of work put into these things, and they have to be affordable. So the average person locally, or even some out locally, could afford it.
Yeah. Okay. So everything that is passed through City Council comes out in terms of a bylaw. Now, if you go through to your city website, City of St. Catharines, City of Niagara Falls website, and look up bylaws, and unless you happen to know the bylaw number, you're probably going to, for example, if you look up Niagara Falls Clean Yards bylaw, you'll find the bylaw probably about 2019, 2020, that's about clean yards and what the rules are for clean yards.
When they passed it, the year.
Dependent upon when they passed it. I don't know. I'm guessing that because most clean yards bylaws seem to come out about 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
and
Because that's when they start enforcing them, and
yeah.
they just
And I
sit
think
out
that
at night to
coincided.
enforce them.
Yeah, I think that coincided with an update to the Municipal Act that talked about clean yards, which is probably something that politicians, municipally and provincially, had been discussing for quite some time.
Yeah, and many times it's where people complain, hey, what
Yeah.
do we do about it? So then they start complaining, okay, let's do something about this.
Yeah, I'm living next to an eyesore, and the municipality says, yeah, I can accept that you're living next to an eyesore, but we don't have the right to actually have it, do anything about it. Right. The province then grants municipalities the right to clean up yards and things like that. And then they go over officious at doing it. Okay. So at the end of the day, then we are talking then about bylaw enforcement. And bylaw enforcement is done by bylaw officers. So, and let's face it, not every bylaw needs enforcing, but things like traffic bylaws need enforcing.
Parking
needs enforcing, yeah. And as do things like homes. Is your home up to the standard? Or have you got long grass in your garden?
Yeah, like if your grass is like 1 centimeter too long, like they can cite you.
And what bylaw enforcement officers do is that they police the local bylaws. They police all of those local bylaws. So, for example, and that goes from most of them don't do traffic tickets as well, because there are specialist parking bylaw officers.
Yeah, they're provincial offences officers. They'll go around.
Well, there are actually people who deal with all the ticketing, all the parking tickets.
Yeah, they have a private thing.
Yeah. And that's often put out to a private company who deals with all of that lot. Because in fact, if bylaw officers were sent out to be dealing with parking tickets, they wouldn't have time to be enforcing the bylaws.
Yeah, right? They wouldn't have time to go out after clean yards.
Yeah. And
or dog poop or anything else.
Dog poop or anything like that. And for example, so what will happen is bylaw enforcement officers are supposed to go around from area to area. Typically, they might be tipped off. And a call will come into city office and say, "Hey, the garden at 71 King Street is overgrown, needs to be dealt with." And what will happen is the bylaw enforcement officer will come around, will look at it, if it is overgrown, they will give a ticket to the owner, and the owner is given a period of time to do something about it.
Yeah.
14 days or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't do it in 14 days, then the city can come along, cut the grass as they wish to see it, and then give the expenses over to your
taxes.
The owner. That can then be collected off their taxes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. At the end of the day.
Yeah, I would say that the city of St. Catharines is particularly effective. Right? Their bylaw officers are very effective.
Yeah.
Like they are triggered by complaints.
Yeah.
So
largely
your music too loud, or your yard is messed up or hoarded up, or you're having unplated vehicles in your driveway, things like that. Someone complains, then somebody will show up, and they're pretty quick.
Yeah. The other thing about that is
that about the time when we complained about the way the front of our office building was, and all kinds of garbage and everything, and the grass was growing 6 feet tall and everything.
We never made such a complaint, Angela.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden,
I have no recollection of making such a complaint.
And then all of a sudden, somebody was over cutting the grass, picking up the garbage, and it was really fast, right?
Yeah.
But it wasn't the bylaw officers; it was somebody that the people who owned the building did. They sent them.
Yeah, yeah. And the point being is that there are standards on these things, and if you don't obey the rules, they can they can ticket you.
Yep.
And the other thing, of course, about this is, okay, so there's a lot of concern about what bylaw enforcement officers can do. And there is a certain amount of, hey, I once was speaking to a police officer. He said, I've got no power at all. You should see what bylaw officers can do. And basically what he was meaning is they can if your car's in the right place, and they can jump over your fence because they can jump across onto your car across the top of the fence and over the top. They can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They have the right and power to do that.
Yeah, I've seen before when I remember that they were looking at there were a particular type of trees, ash trees, silver ash trees or whatever, that there was these bugs that were invading them. So bylaw officers were called, and they, like the ones that enforce trees and forestry, that sort of thing. So they were just going onto properties, right? And they were checking to see if there was any of those trees in the back, and if they had these bugs. And then they would, of course, advise the homeowner what to do about it. So things like that, they'll just go right into the backyard,
Yeah.
Like nobody invited you, sir.
The other thing, of course, that they can also do, by the way, which police officers don't and won't, is if your front or back door happens to be unlocked and they happen to be wanting to inspect, they can open the door and walk in. They can barge in if they believe there to be an infraction in your house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like maybe too many dogs, too many cats.
Yeah, I guess that kind of thing. Overcrowding, potentially overcrowding of people. Maybe they think you're running an illegal Airbnb or something like that.
Oh God, that would be awful, Peter.
But these sort of things that they do. So just make sure you keep your door locked.
Yeah, keep the door locked so these bylaw officers can
invite bylaw officers in. Really don't.
Yeah, you don't want them around.
And hey, I was ticketed once a long time ago for actually not having for having a roof that was very slightly curved. When I was showing the curve, I was exaggerating it by a massive amount. Warrantless entry for inspections, etc. Police generally need warrants. Yes, bylaw officers.
Absolutely. Like if police need warrants, and they're more heavily controlled and regulated, and people prefer that. Yeah. And if police are doing that, there's usually a darn good reason if they're entering your place. And the thing is, for bylaw officers, why do they have less oversight like that?
Yeah. Well, as I said, we had a bylaw officer came to our place, and he's saying, "Oh, your roof is sagging." Yes, there was a slight dip in the roof at the front, and if you don't fix the roof and bring it up to building code standards within a month, you've got 30 days to fix it. Otherwise, you're going to knock the thing down.
Whoa!
That's essentially what the bylaw notice said. There was no indication that there was no water seepage in through the roof into the actual area inside the house. And essentially all I did to actually resort it was put some new boards up across the old boards of the roof and then retiled the whole roof. And all I did was essentially, where the dip is still underneath the old boards, I just put support boards in there and held the new boards up onto the against the wall. They were into the tied into the wall now. All right, so they fall under municipality, and they don't have a standard as laid out on the Police and Police Services Act. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They just and that's why they get to do what they want to do.
But if a bylaw officer comes into your place and finds an infraction, they must, or even if they spot an infraction from the outside, they will essentially put a notice on your door, which is about a bylaw violation. And by the way, as a technicality, you're not allowed to remove those notices from your door.
Oh, wasn't there one time in one case where we were working for a client, but somehow the people that they tenanted out on a commercial residence, that they had a bylaw infraction, and they kept ripping their notices down when the town went over there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The town doesn't like that kind of thing.
No. Yeah, exactly. So the town does not like it when you now, what's supposed to happen is there is supposed to be there is an infraction notice that is put onto the door of the place, and you're supposed to have an infraction notice that is either sent by mail to the homeowner, to the business owner, or whoever, so that they have a proper notice.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's not legal to actually take them down. Although in practical terms, when you've got a notice that's about 3 foot long and it's taped to the top of the door and it blows in the wind, what are you going to do?
Don't they put blue tape on it?
Yeah, they put the kind of tape on it that you normally put along the edges of skirt boards when you're painting the room.
Mm-hmm. That kind of keeps them from flying off or that sort of thing, so that the person who removes them or rips them off doesn't have an excuse and say,
well, at the end of the day, I think it's practical that if you've gotten a bylaw infraction, and it's a 3 foot long, 3-4 page notice that's stuck on your door, it's just practical that you remove it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you'd want to read it, what you're supposed to do to get rid of that bylaw notice.
Yeah. and typically what'll happen is it'll come along and it will say you've got so many days to actually do, to fix the problem. And for example, if you've got a situation and it says you've got 30 days to fix the problem, if you go and get an estimate and, for example, repairing a roof in the middle of winter, it's totally impractical.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I don't think you're going to get a roofer at that time either.
Yeah. You're not going to get a roofer out coming near you. A roofer might come and give you an estimate, but a roofer's not going up the roof and fixing the roof.
Mm-hmm.
30 days. Not going to happen if you're talking about a notice that's put on your door in the middle of January.
Yeah, and then there's other things happen, like what if the property is tenanted and not lived in by the owner?
Yeah.
And then they ask you to do something like, say, vacate it. Generally the council that's representing the landlord can work with the city to make sure that is being completed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we get a number of these sort of things whereby people coming along and saying, "Oh, I need the tenants out because the city has dictated that I must complete this block of work." It's very rare that you actually need the tenants out, and very often what you do is you put the tenants into a hotel for a few weeks and fix the problem.
Yeah, exactly. The tenants continue to pay the rent. The landlord covers the hotel.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the way the law is.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, a bylaw officer has the right to actually say that this is unsafe. And that's why we employ them. They're trained looking at things like building things that are unsafe. But not everything that a bylaw officer says is necessarily unsafe.
Mm-hmm. There's various reasons why a bylaw officer may tag the place.
Yeah.
It could be overcrowded, could be something, even fire safe. There could be issues with fire safe. Or you have an illegal basement and you're renting out an illegal basement. I mean, it may be safe, but you're supposed to have fire separation and all that other stuff in there. So they would tell you that you need to get all that stuff set up.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so moving on. So what are the powers of a bylaw officer?
Oh, they can do whatever they want, Peter.
They can't. There are
know.
limitations. For example, a bylaw. There's a clear difference between a bylaw officer and a police officer. Police officer is there. A bylaw officer could ticket you if you have an unlicensed vehicle on your property.
Yeah.
However, they probably couldn't ticket you if the unlicensed vehicle happened to be parked up in the garage. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are things.
The other thing is that if you happen to have, for example, a plated vehicle that's on your driveway that hasn't left your driveway in 4 years and doesn't have an up-to-date, or back in the day when we had them, didn't have an up-to-date MTO sticker on them, they couldn't ticket you for that.
Mm-hmm.
That would be something a police officer would do, but a police officer would not do so because that's on private land. Unless he's got proof that that vehicle is being operated on the road, he would not ticket it.
Yeah. Like if they see you get in and drive off with it.
Yeah. But if he sees you get in and what you're doing is opening the front and fiddling with the engine, he's not going to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So and generally speaking, most powers of bylaw officers, except for the fact they don't carry a warrant around with them when they're looking at infractions.
They don't arrest you and handcuff you.
Yeah, they don't arrest you. They don't handcuff you. Infractions that you get could end up in a ticket, if they deem it worthy of a ticket.
The only time it can get serious is if it ends up into the court where they're trying to enforce some type of action and then people refuse to follow that order because it becomes a court order. That's more of a criminal act.
Yeah, as Paul has said here, Municipal Act 2001 provides bylaw officers the power to enter without a warrant, but they can only enter. They can't break unlike the police, they can't break your door down.
Mm-hmm. Right? Imagine that with battering rams.
I
saw them down the street with battering rams.
Yeah, they can only enter if you actually have an unlocked door.
If it's open.
Yeah, and for example, if you actually had, let's say that you actually had a contractor down fixing something in your house that day, and there happens to be the bylaw officer goes by, and the door happens to be wide open, and the contractor's in and out of the door.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to stop the bylaw officer from actually going in if he wants to.
No.
And the contractor could stand up and say, no, you're not allowed. But ultimately, the bylaw officer has the right to enter.
Yeah. He has to see if there's anything. And if he does, then he can just put a notice on your door.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it can't go in forcibly, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen it one time. There was a fire going on and all the doors were locked. And I remember they're just taking a battering ram. Hey, there are police and fire trucks. Everybody again, a battering ram and they went in.
Yeah. Again, that's actually the police that's doing the battering.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and the fire, because they had to let the fire in. And then the fire people just got...
And again... The police don't need a warrant for that kind of entry because they're dealing with it under an emergency provision.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. There wasn't anybody in there, thank God.
Yeah. Yeah, but the concern that they might have may well be that there might well be children, unattended children in there. Mm-hmm. There might well be pets in there, cats or dogs.
And I worry about the pets. Every time I see those things, I said, I hope there's no animals in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, yeah, so Exigency, yes, exactly. That's where the police officers can use it. Bylaw officers don't have such capability. Okay, so what if you get a ticket from a bylaw officer, or I've used the word ticket. Essentially, you will end up with something that resembles a ticket if you've got an infraction. It might be
you'll have
a
your
notice.
logo on it, and it'll explain what kind of bylaw infraction you have with the section of the bylaw that it is, and the fine.
And there's two types of ways that they deal with these. One is by means of the administrative monetary penalty system. And administrative monetary penalty system basically means that, for example, they're saying, hey, your grass is unkempt, Angela. We've just sent our people round to cut it. Here's $1,000 ticket. And by the way, if you don't pay it in the next month, it's going to go on your next year's property taxes.
Yep. I've seen people get up to $20,000 or $25,000 in fines because many times it's tenants that do this.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say one person fell foul of the bylaw, the Clean Yards bylaw, I meant to say, and it was the tenants at fault, not the owner of the property. And the tenants basically we were trying to actually negotiate a way that the tenants would have to pay the penalty. It's a problem because, in fact, remember, I think it's somewhere in the region of 2/3 of all properties here are actually tenanted rather than owned by homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
And those tenanted properties, it really should be the tenants that pay the penalty for the bylaw infractions and not the homeowners.
But you know why they do it that way? It's because to enforce it on the tenants is going to be difficult.
Yeah. Well, actually, the other thing is that you know who the owner is.
Yep.
You don't know, from a municipal viewpoint, you know who the owner is. You don't know who the tenant is. You don't know whether it's Mary Jones or Joe Bloggs, right?
Yeah, the tenant can give a fake name.
Yeah, but you know that Abdul Khan owns the place because he's he's who you collect your property tax from.
Yeah, and then what you do is you just and then if the landlord is keep on getting these things and the tenant does this stuff, and then the landlord would have to go to the landlord tenant board to get that money back from the tenant. Yeah.
Okay, tribunals and screening bodies. That's another thing. So if you don't have whether you have an administrative monetary penalty or not, you end up with a tribunal or a screening body potentially within the municipality. If you don't have an administrative monetary penalty for some bylaw infractions, it'll end up going to the provincial offences court, and you can argue it out there.
Yeah, and that's better because if you have an AMPS, you cannot argue you're innocent.
Yeah.
You're not guilty. Yeah. You have to. The only way you can go through that is sometimes you could get, like, if it's completely withdrawn, sometimes they will do that at an appeal stage. Yeah. But a lot of times the only avenue there is to reduce your fine.
Well, and the other sort of thing that can happen with AMPS is that you go to a screening body, and the screening body looks at the ticket and says, okay, your argument here is that, for example, it's not an inoperative vehicle. It may not be working at the moment. You are in the process of replacing the cylinder head for it. I accept that therefore the ticket doesn't apply to this particular vehicle. Mm-hmm. So I'm striking this particular ticket out. So
yeah, they can withdraw that.
They can withdraw a ticket. Yeah. Now, one of the interesting questions about this is that, for example, you're given 14 days to remove you've got a clean yards bylaw inspection. You're given 14 days to remove the waste on your garden, and you appeal it through a screening organization. But so on the 1st of October, you're given your ticket. By the 5th of October, you've put your ticket into the local city, and you've got 14 days to actually clear the thing up. But you've already asked for a screening application, now comes by the 14th of October. Should the municipality have the right to go and remove said offending items? I think that's an open question. I would argue no.
No.
Because if you put it into the screening, they shouldn't be doing anything until the screening decision is made.
Yeah, there should be a bar put on that before any final decision is made.
Yeah, absolutely.
But sometimes you take things out beforehand, and everything disappears in their backyard, and then where are they?
Yeah. and that's it could be an important thing, especially when accused of certain things that could be easily rectified. Okay,
so if they go to a screening and then somebody withdraws a ticket and it says, okay, that's okay, sorry about this, we did a mistake, and then meanwhile their stuff is gone.
Well, that's a problem you can't get out of. What do you do when the stuff is gone? Okay, so the other question about municipal bylaws is many municipal bylaws will have a need for an ad hoc tribunal that can be set up by the city at a particular point that can make a decision based upon an appeal or some form of application that a resident can make to the city based upon certain municipal rules. So those
committee of adjustment, that's one.
Sorry?
You have your committee of adjustment, that's one. You also have your building code appeals tribunal.
But a committee of adjustment is a permanent body.
Committee of adjustment, that's mostly under I think it's your planning act.
It's a planning act one, and what will happen is typically in the first 6 months of the new council coming in. So, for example, the last council that we had was 2022. In the first 6 months of the new council being elected, there will be applications for membership of the committee, and you apply to become a committee member, and you're selected based upon your knowledge, your understanding, etc., and your expertise in certain areas, and they may even interview you as a member of any of those committees, right? So as you can say, committee of adjustment is one such body, but it's not really a tribunal, it's a committee. And if a committee of adjustment if you believe a committee of adjustment made an error, you can actually appeal it to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and you can appeal a planning decision from the full city council to the Ontario Land Tribunal. But there are many other decisions that the city makes that can be done to what are called ad hoc tribunals. Now, I have a problem with ad hoc tribunals because usually the adjudicator is not a lawyer, is not a paralegal, is not a person who understands legality. Is often either a city council member or a member of staff or a group of 2 or 3 members of staff that are appointed on an ad hoc basis. And the reason they do that is to save money, but they don't have an understanding of the law.
Yeah, like this is one of the things that have always bothered me about the Niagara Regional Housing Appeals Committee. Right? These are just people who are elected, and then there's a few people who are staff and maybe 1 or 2 others. And you go in there and you appeal some kind of decision they made to evict you because they took away your subsidy, and then you couldn't afford the market rent, and then you got thrown out. And by the time you get to that point, you're probably already out. And these people who make these decisions, oh, well, we just want to make sure we follow the rules. Hello?
And if you want to make sure that you followed the rules, firstly, you have a permanent tribunal. Even if it only ever sits once a year, you pay them on a per diem basis. You pay the tribunal members on a per diem basis. Even if you only met once in 4 years, you'd still pay them on that per diem basis. All right. 2, they are permanent members of the tribunal, and 3, they are legally qualified.
Yep. They should be looking for people who have legal training, paralegals, lawyers.
And I'm not saying that
even retired lawyers.
Yeah. And for example, it might well be that you could put a former city council member on there where they are not they're not legally trained, they're not legally etc. But so long as, let's say, 2 out of 3 of the adjudicators on the body are actually legally trained, you can do that. You can do that sort of thing.
Yep, because I always get nervous when they move away from that type of thing, because they don't know the laws, they make mistakes, and then afterwards you have to go to the higher level where they have to have people who are legally trained, and it could be expensive for the person who has to do this work.
Yeah, and essentially now you're in the divisional court to appeal it.
Yeah.
And because you're looking at what's called a judicial review at that stage.
Yeah, because you have to appeal this almost on a question of law.
Yeah.
And you can't just appeal the arguments that you put in that were mixed law and fact.
Yeah, yeah. And so these tribunals really need to think more about the setting up of these tribunals. They should not be ad hoc. They need to be permanent, and they need to be more the structure needs to be more well defined. And in fact, it would be fair for municipal tribunals to adopt the rules of the SPPA. These,
Yep.
You know,
and then have things go out once a year or twice a year, or every 2 years or so, to have people to apply to sit on them, and then they have them apply and then get paid a per diem.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a couple of tribunals that do that type of thing. I know a paralegal who sits on one of these municipal tribunals. He sits on essentially a planning appeals tribunal. Right. It's interesting. We often discuss planning matters because we're both interested in planning matters.
Yeah, and then the City of Toronto has an amazing set of tribunals that they've set up.
Yeah. Okay. But again, when you think about it, the City of St. Catharines versus the City of Toronto, you might have 1 or 2 appeals to a tribunal versus hundreds.
Yeah.
Right. The sheer size would make the difference. Okay. So moving on, building codes. I mentioned building codes because, in fact, actually building codes are probably one of the areas where bylaws come into play a lot. For example, a stop order on a building site. You have to get a building permit to do anything. And for example, if somebody comes and spots something that's wrong, they might well apply for a stop order, which means that all work in that building stops.
Yep. And then, because they can make you tear it all down, get a permit, then build it again.
Yeah. And they don't care how much it cost.
Yeah. I had somebody had to do that with a fire code installation of interconnected fire alarms and stuff. And this costed a lot of money. They were threatening to take that for there. And the person who did it was a professional fire alarm installer. And so what we did is we sued. We sued because this guy failed to get a permit to do this.
Yeah.
Okay? And then he came by and he just paid what the cost was.
Well, actually, it was the same way, and you'd think that in Ontario this will never happen. But somebody started building a new on some land that they owned. It wasn't a question about dispute of land. Everything was all kosher about the land ownership, etc., etc. They just simply started building a new development on the land. They never got plan. They never took it to the town
No
hall.
permits, nothing.
They didn't apply for plan. For their under the plan.
No engineers' drawings, nothing.
So they got through. They'd spent like $500,000 on this new building, and then the building inspector said no.
It happens.
Yeah.
We even have a building downtown at Church Street where the old gas building, they were trying to build, and they're trying to build condos in there. And they were doing this for quite some time, since 2008 or 9 or something. Mm-hmm. And they gone in there, and then they found asbestos. Somebody reported to the Ministry of Labor. Then instantly, stop order, everybody was sent home.
Yeah. And actually, the thing
nobody started anything again.
Yeah. And the thing about asbestos, and that's a perfect example about something that's totally out of the control of anybody, because in fact, actually, that would cause a bylaw stop order to occur. Mm-hmm. Yet it's likely that the owner of the building, the designer of the building, etc., didn't know that the asbestos was there.
Yeah, especially an older building that was built during a certain period of time, that there has to be some kind of evaluation whether this could include asbestos, and they have to take proper steps.
And probably what happened is that the purchaser of the building did some inquiries and was told, no, asbestos was taken out in the early 80s. Now, 40 years later, they find that only a half-baked job was done in the early 80s.
Yes, and that's very often the case.
They took it out on the 3rd floor, not on the 14th floor.
Mm-hmm. That's very much often the case, and that's what people have to watch. Yeah, because I remember that happened, and what happened at that time, and everybody was just sent home. The Ministry of Labor showed up and said, nope, you can't do this. Everybody goes home. And ever since that day, and this was almost 15 years ago, 15 years ago or so, maybe more, and nobody's ever stepped foot in that building since, even though the signs are still up front about all the wonderful condos that are supposed to go in there.
And the place is just falling apart.
Yep, exactly. And then these buildings are just sitting there. So there's tons of those buildings just sitting there doing nothing.
Yep. Okay, so it's been a bit of a look at what municipal bylaws are. And by the way, if you do end up with a kind of dispute over things like some of the changes you want to do to buildings and that sort of thing, you'll end up going to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Right, this is a proper pucker body that's actually run by Ontario. It operates under the SPPA.
Independent Judicial. Yeah, the tribunal.
It's a proper tribunal, so it's not like the municipal tribunals, all right?
And as you can tell, this is a pet project of Peter's, because he likes municipal law, and we talk about it a lot.
Well, we had to cycle back to it at some point. Right?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Absolutely.
Okay. And just to remind everybody that if you need to contact us at Invictus Legal, you can do so at 905-688-5598, or email Angela at weareinvictus.legal, or me at peter@weareinvictus.legal, or you can visit our website, which is weareinvictus.legal.
Yeah.
And moving on, also, we have to give you this warning every show.
Yep, this is not legal advice. This is not Facebook University or Google JD. This is Spin Legal, where we talk about subjects on just as a discussion topic or topics of interest for the public. But we do not give legal advice in this program, and anything we say in this program is not legal advice. I don't want you to go somewhere and says, I heard this on Spin Legal that we can do this. No, you have to go and see your own lawyer or paralegal to do this. Even if your situation sounded similar to that of a friend, it doesn't necessarily mean your solution is the same as what your friend's was.
Oh, yeah.
So you get proper legal advice and move on with it.
Yeah.
I hope
And
you come by ours. You could come by Invictus Legal and have a chat with us. But as I said, just have a chat with somebody.
yeah. All right. And have a great week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Absolutely. See you next Tuesday.